Y'all know what it is.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Eggs. Today's special guest is Shawna Schuh. Shawna helps business leaders evolve into their highest potential by unlocking their inner communicator and giving them the skills they need to guide teams, both small and large, across generations. With more than 3 decades of experience and 2 TED Talks under her belt, Shawna has become an innovative thought leader who can help you unpack the pesky problems one encounters when managing people. With a curious mind herself and a master's certificate in Neuro-Linguistic Programming, Shawna is exceptionally skilled at the art of uncovering leadership blind spots and catapulting leaders out of the leadership weeds. Joining us today for a conversation about how the best leaders can become the best question askers, generating big business with cross-generational teams, and how we as leaders can not only motivate our teams, but motivate ourselves to be the best us that we can be. Please join us in welcoming to the show, Shawna Schuh. Hey, Shawna, how are you?
Yay! Up and then suddenly, so thank you. I'm good.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, no, thanks so much for joining us today. We're thrilled to death to get talking to you, and we have a lot of ground to cover. So I guess let's just get started. Can we start out, I guess, sort of in the beginning? Do you mind telling our audience, sort of who you are, where you come from, and what you do?
Probably the most important thing is that I know what I'm doing. I've been doing it for a long, long time. I live in rural Western Oregon on a 20-acre, I wouldn't call it a farm, I'd call it more of a ranchette. I own a horse boarding facility as one of my businesses and an Airbnb, and then I do my coaching and speaking business. I do it from my house. Of course, when I speak, I go out and do it for companies. But that's kind of the crux of it, is that, and I have a different perspective, I think, because I live in the country and I also live with other species. And I think that that's vital for, number one, it's happening in the world everywhere. I mean, animals are overtaking our homes, our beds, and it's a great thing for leaders to learn from, is our other species, I think.
Can you break that down a little bit?
Can I what?
Can you break that down a little bit? I mean, like, how can a dog teach me how to run a business? I mean, I like my dogs, they're smart and all, but I mean, I don't know that he can do the books. So,
well, he can't. However, there was one of my favorite stories is a gentleman who was running a business and successful, and yet his CFO had known me from before, and I was working with a different client, and I got her card on my windshield, and it said, "Come see me in suite," whatever it was. And I go in and she goes, "If you don't go talk to our CEO, I'm walking out of this place." And I was like, whoa. So I ended up talking with him, and he was smart and he was successful and he was a go-getter and he was aggressive, intelligent, and he was knocking people down. He just didn't know who he was working with. He didn't have empathy or compassion. And he also, he was just go, go, go. So I ended up working with him, which was a blessing. I like to work with super smart people. And yet one time I said to him, I think you might value by having a dog. And he was like, what? No, they're filthy and they're dirty and you got to take responsibility. And I'm like, yeah, and you can't fire them. And you have to actually learn how to communicate with them to get what you want. And that's where I believe they help you run your business, in that we're leaders a lot of times do 3 things. Or I find most of the leaders I work with, they're telling all the time. They're telling people what to do, and they're telling them how they want it done, and they're telling them about their why, and they're telling, and they're telling, and they're telling. And then they're also selling. They're selling their vision. They're selling what they want done. And so they're doing this job of telling and selling. And then some leaders, many of us, they allow bad attitudes, or they allow gossip, or they allow some things inside the organization. And this hurts the organization down the road, whether they know it or not. They ultimately will. And so I believe the best leaders ask. And if you look at it, I'm going to elaborate just a teeny bit more. I'm a horsewoman as well, but like, you tell a dog to sit, and if the dog doesn't do it, you know what I mean? Some people tell it 3 and 4 times. And then the dog learns it's supposed to sit on the 4th time. Okay. Well, this is the same way with our teams. Need this done, and I need it by this afternoon, but people don't get it done or whatever. Then you're irritated. And finally, when you're angry, they're going to get it done for you. Well, if we were really going to be asking in a different way, let's take this dog, for instance. You would say, sit, and the dog doesn't do it. So right then you have a choice. Yell at it, ask it again, ask it more forcibly, or you could change your tactics. You could show it. You could make it something in it for them until you get what you want. Then you praise what you want and off you go. Did that make sense to you?
Yeah, and maybe I've got a little bit of an advantage because I watched your TED Talk where you were talking about the pig that you tried to push, and basically, and as you're talking, I'm thinking about my own dog. She was a rescue, and it took a fair bit of work to get her to sort of a manageable, behavior pattern where unfortunately the dog she was replacing was a saint and could do no wrong, so she had a high bar. And but she's done really well and she's come a long way. But in your story, in your TED Talk, you talk about just, shaking a bowl of food out front of the pig. And that's exactly what we have to do with this dog. So it kind of makes me laugh to hear that.
Brian. And one last thing, you don't know what it is. Some animals, and this is the same as your teams, are incredibly food motivated. Others aren't. And it's your job as a leader to kind of figure out, well, food's not motivating them, or this isn't motivating them. And so by asking questions, which is my gig really big, you get what you want.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And, one of the things that I'm hearing in what you're saying is, especially with the telling and the selling, is this is maybe a communication problem. And while I was doing research for this show, I came across a quote on your website that I just want to share, which I love, but I think it's exactly this, or it's a big part of this. It says the biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it's taken place, and that's from George Bernard Shaw. And what I love about that in relation to relationship to what you're saying is, if we're so busy telling everybody and we're so busy, selling our way or trying to convince people to do things our way, then there's no room for this sort of, I guess, two-way street that's sort of necessary in communication. And so I think that, that you make a good observation there, but I really liked that quote. I think it's, particularly poignant here.
Yeah, it's my favorite one. I alter it slightly and say the challenge with communication is the illusion it's been achieved. Because we really think we got it, and my leaders will say, I told them multiple times, talk about your spouses. They're like, how come this didn't get done? Like, well, I didn't know. Well, I told you. Well, yeah, like that's supposed to mean that I heard it. I didn't hear it. So.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking about my kids too. I mean, you're bringing out a lot of things with me. So clearly I've got some room to improve, because I know I tell those kids all the time to do stuff. They just never do it. So until the third or fourth time, and then I shake a bowl in front of them and they'll run and go do it. But. So great. Well, no, would you mind talking a little bit then about how you sort of got into this line of work? So, I mean, you obviously, have taken and you're applying some of your lessons in, from having worked with animals and everything else. But I mean, now you're coaching at like really high levels. I saw you worked with Nike, you've worked with some other Oregon-based companies, Columbia. Even though I'm a North Face guy, I'll let Columbia slide. But
Columbia Sportswear does.
Yeah, no, much of my family is in Oregon, actually in a very rural part of Oregon too, about 2 hours south of you. And so, but they're big Columbia people. So I always crack that joke when I talk to Oregonians. But I wondered if you wouldn't talk about how you sort of, I guess made the transition or decided you could apply this knowledge to business leadership.
Thank you. I guess as a leader and also somebody, I was a seeker from a very young age, and I'm not exactly certain. I think it's because I was adopted at birth. And so maybe just knowing that the gift of my life, I just never took it for granted. I was so glad that I was adopted instead of the other alternatives that people who don't want children can do. And my folks were older than me. And so I really had an opportunity to do a lot of reading and studying, and my folks really encouraged that. And so as I was moving through, I was kind of opened up, my mind opened up. I saw Zig Ziglar in my teens, Zig Ziglar with, all of his motivation and and I was like, well, that makes sense. And I learned early that you're like the 5 people that you're around the most. This has been told forever, but it's true. And so pick your friends in most of the time we have friends because they were close to us or we went to school with them, instead of ones that we actually selected because they make us better. So there was a lot of things that I was doing. And then I went on the road and traveled all over the United States, the Caribbean, Europe, and I really got a flavor for what was going on in the world. And there was hierarchies. I was part of a performance troops, and so there's egos and all of this. And I navigated that. I came home because my dad was sick. There wasn't an awful lot of work for unemployed entertainers in Oregon, So I ended up applying. I actually sang telegrams for a while. And if you want to know human emotion things, my dad was sick. I would go in and I would be, Polly Darton or one of these characters. Everybody was happy. It was always for an event like an anniversary or a birthday. So it gave me an opportunity to be around happy people all the time, even though in my life things were somewhat sad. So I applied and started teaching, finishing fashion and commercial work because I'd been through finishing school. And what I realized is that the entertainment piece helped because people learned better with analogy or a story. And that's where animals came forward. It was like, they're always doing something funny. And they have no, I'm going to say they don't have any shame. They're just, if you go up to someone and say, will you play with me? And they say, no, I'm too busy. Well, then you take offense. But if an animal comes up and says, hey, play with me. And you go, no, I'm too busy. The animal goes, okay, I'll play with myself. They just don't take offense. So as I started using more and more of that inside my stories, it opened, and I was doing presentations, and then companies, Columbia Sportswear or a lumber company, or I worked for a Spirit Mountain casino, and they would go, you think differently. Would you come and talk to our team? And next thing I know, we're making incredible inroads. So at the same time, I'm taking this path of learning all my, my business, getting my business certificates and finishing my communication training and getting my neuro-linguistic programming stuff, because I wanted to use my own way of thinking, but also within the structure, even though I tweak my structure all the time, to help the most people. Because my real goal and why I'm on your show is to help as many people as I can.
So you mentioned neuro-linguistic programming. It's a phrase I've heard a few times, but I've never gone down the rabbit hole of actually Googling it and figuring out what it is. Can you maybe break that down for us and how it's applicable in business?
Well said. And it is a rabbit hole. And we live in rabbit hole world, because once you start down a path, neuro-linguistic programming is a fascinating study and not easy. I had listened to books before and I'd read things about it. It's very experiential. And the three elements that are in it, and the ones that are very good for business, is it's neurology. It's how our brains fire. And so it's continuously evolving, because we're learning more about the way our brains fire than ever before. And so there's neural pathways inside your brain. And so when you learn something new, the neural pathways are just starting to hook together. And if you do it again and you do it again, it becomes strong. But what all of us, people don't want to learn new software because they learn it, they go through the training of it, and then guess what? We don't do it for a little while. Then we can't even remember how to get into the program or what the name of it was, because the neural pathway broke away. And it's the same with animals, by the way. When you are teaching a dog or a horse something, and you do it again and again and again, you're building the neural pathway until every single time you say this thing or give this cue, they understand it. So that's the neurology about it. And it's fascinating, our brains. The second piece is called linguistics, or language. And for my clients, I'm the word watcher. And so it's not really the word, it's the intent behind the word. But when you start breaking down what people are actually saying and how detrimental some of their phrases are, and like when somebody goes, well, to be honest, and there's, as a leader, just a tiny bit of me is going, are you not honest the rest of the time? Or they say something, I call them absolutes. They go, a leader will go, I am always something. I'm always on time. And I'm thinking as part of your team, well, you weren't on time the other day. What else do you lie about? So I'm there to come alongside and go, let's knock down some of these things that are detrimental to you as a leader, using absolutes, always, every, never. Those are absolutes that I would eradicate. And then what is the language that you're using that is maybe weakening you? So that's the third part, or second part, neuro, brain, language, the way we speak, but more importantly, that's our belief systems. And lastly, which I find fascinating, is programming. And we as humans are programmed. Now in America, we have some really good programs. In America, everyone drives on the right side of the road. Okay, I mean, you get in your car and you're not even thinking about it, you're on the right side of the road. But if you go to Australia or Europe where they drive on the other, you're gonna nearly kill yourself and you're gonna make everybody else angry. We are so programmed in certain things. And so as a coach, one of the things that I do with my leaders is to help them uncover where the programs are that don't serve them. And many of us have them. My mom gave me a program when I was very young to eat everything on my plate. This is not a good program.
Yeah,
I mean, I feel bad. Do you have that one too?
Yep, I've got that one.
So how do we break those patterns? Did that explain it better?
Yeah, I think that's useful. Or Mike, what do you think?
Kind of. I as you were talking about it, it reminded me of a book called The Talent Code. I can't remember who does that. Daniel Coyle. But he's talking in his book, he's talking and referencing athletes and pianists and high level performers type things. And I remember the book, he was talking about like synapses and how muscle memory kind of takes place. And I don't know why it stood out to me when you were describing that, but I think it kind of maybe goes hand in hand as far as like what you're taught at a young age, you excel in. So I don't know. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a neurologist. I don't know all that stuff, but just a few things that you said there stood out and made me think of that book. So book recommendation, anyone, if you're
Well, and it's funny too, maybe this is, thank God you're not a psychologist, Mike. Maybe this has something to do with me, but like the whole time she's going through those things, I'm thinking about all the stupid things that I say all the time without thinking, sort of like the to be honest, or the, in any case, or, whatever, those kinds of little, whatever they are, these little phrases that are, I guess, programmed or just sort of automatically part of my language. And it's become especially prescient lately because I've been, I hired an outside sales team to help us out with my marketing company. And one of the challenges that we're running into at this point is me communicating the vision of the company or the idea of what we do to these random people who don't know me, who are making phone calls on my behalf.
Yes.
Right? So, and it's this super iterative process because I can't seem to put into words or articulate what works. I just know that when they read me back my script, that it's not working. And so, so it's been really interesting because just thinking about the type of language I'm using, and maybe it's not exactly neuro-linguistic programming, but the phrases that I use, to be honest, as an example, those kinds of things are probably littered throughout my writing and littered throughout my approach or the way I describe my business. And I don't even realize that what I'm communicating is something totally different than what I mean to be communicating. So I think that that's a really interesting point.
It is. And bravo for you to understand that, especially when you have somebody say it back. And here's your question. When you actually ask someone, instead of, let me tell you what we're about, let me tell you what we do and what I want, and I, and us. And you stop and you go, tell me what you've uncovered from working with us so far. Eye-opening, and they're going to feed back and you're going to go, holy moly, help me understand how you came to that. And that's when you will start to peel off what they're seeing first, or what you've said first, or where you put emphasis that you didn't intend.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's especially interesting, like in the way that we're trying to pitch this. So I run a marketing agency or an ad agency, and the business, or the way that I'm trying to pitch the business, is really ethereal, right? Because I don't want to make an assumption about what's wrong with your business, right? I want you to come to me and tell me. But trying to get people via cold call or email marketing or LinkedIn marketing or whatever to understand that what I need is, hey, I know you've got an issue. Let's talk about it. Versus, oh, well, I'm a web designer and a graphic designer, and all that stuff. And so I found in my first couple scripts, I really focused heavy on our philosophy, and we got like no buzz, right? Like people are just like, what are you even talking about? This is like agency talk, right? Then the second version was very tactical. So, oh, we're web design, we're graphic design, we're all these things, right? Well, then it occurs to me, well, if you don't need web design, then conversation's over. We're done talking already, And so instead, now we're working on a new sort of philosophical hybrid, where people understand who we are, but understand that we're here to solve problems, and they can come, tell us their problems, but it would be presumptuous of us to guess what their problem is. And so anyway, so it's a challenge. I'm digressing a little bit, but anyway, the language thing, or the point is, that communication is a struggle. And I'm certain that I use all kinds of these little cues that might be steering the ship the wrong way.
Well, and if I may, because it's fascinating. So you've done one way, and what I love about what you're doing is the best humans, leaders, even animals, they're going to figure out how to get it done. Like if they can't make it through, they'll figure out another path. So right now you've done two, and now you're doing this. And may I be so bold as to say that when I work with most of my clients, they really don't know what they need. They know they want something more than what they've got, whether it be more money or more communication, or it's up to you as this marketing person to say it appears as if, or if this is the end result, and then ask them, is that what you do want? Because we really we want happiness. Well, whatever that looks like, you can be happy right this minute. Just decide. So I find that less and less people, we really don't know what that, I don't even know what's wrong with my marketing, right? Help me, Ryan. I don't know. And you're like, well, we can't be so presumptuous to tell you what's wrong with it. Maybe you can. like my clients are expecting my expertise. I'm the best at what I do in my realm, right? So if they come to me and I'm listening to them, and I'm then my goal is to challenge them to say, you're saying this, is this really what you want? And believe it or not, usually it is not.
Yeah,
it really isn't. Does that make sense, Mike?
It totally does. I'm thinking back to your dog analogy or your animal analogy. They can't really tell you what is hurting them, right. I got to take him to the vet. He's not acting weird. They can't really tell you. You have to kind of go and diagnose and take the cues, like he's not putting weight on his paw, or he's not doing this, or he's not doing that. So I could see how you can kind of have to, your clients aren't necessarily going to tell you, well, you did this and I didn't appreciate that, or this. They're more tactful. They're not necessarily going to say exactly what's bugging them, and you have to kind of almost read the tea leaves and kind of figure it out, if you know what I mean.
I do.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean, because as they talk, and it would be the same for you, Ryan, as they're saying, we want more of this, or we want to show up, there is something underneath all that really is the issue.
Yeah.
And that's the best thing about leadership, or really paying attention and asking more questions, because you'll uncover what the real issue is. It's very rarely what we say at the top.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. And actually, just thinking about what Mike just said about the dogs and sort of relaying it onto your sort of animal metaphors. I mean, no, it makes perfect sense, right? I mean, most people don't realize what's wrong. The dog might say, okay, or is limping around because their paw hurts, but they don't understand that the real problem is that there's a thorn in their paw, or that they step in the briar patch, and so they're getting stuck up with things. Like there's some underlying issue that the symptom is, now I'm hopping around on one paw, but the reality is that the greater issue is, oh, maybe I need to knock down those thorns, or maybe I need to clear that bit of land, or whatever, or find out why my dog keeps going in there, or whatever. But you might be able to arrive at a different conclusion if you're diagnosing rather than, I guess, sort of reacting to symptoms, and I think that that's part of the challenge in this particular sales, example, is that in a cold call environment or in this medium, we don't have the opportunity to really go back and forth, right? It's we need to get somebody on the hook and then we can have this conversation later. And so in this case, I probably am going to be appealing most to whatever that top line issue is, right? We want more website traffic. Well, the problem is you can't get more website traffic because A, B, C, and D. Your website's bad, your SEO is bad, your social presence is bad, whatever it is. Here's the 5 reasons that you can't get more traffic. But that diagnose step doesn't happen until I've already got them on the hook. And so I think that that's been part of the challenge with this outsourced sales approach is just, basically you have to hit somebody on the day that they've got a problem that's very top of mind, and then, bring them in for the greater conversation. And so I think that's why this particular medium has been challenging. But as a leader, I mean, it's the case, in person as well.
Yes. Well, and I found also the longer I've done what I do is there's overriding challenges to every business. It's like, let's take leadership, for instance. Is there any leader that couldn't be a better communicator? Is there any man or woman that couldn't be a better communicator, parent? And so when you really look at it and say, is your communication all it could be? The answer to that is no. It is not. If you think your communication is all that in a bag of chips, we already know what's wrong.
Another problem.
And so, let's say arrogance, ego. And so when you look at it and say, you probably know that there's some inherent things that are across the board wrong with most people's marketing, because that's what your gig is, right?
Yeah.
So for me, when I work with leaders, there's not a leader that I feel that I could not help in some way, only because we're humans. And we all have egos and we all have fears and we all are trying to do our best, and we stumble through our language. So that's where I come from, is like, however, you have to actually find someone, right, in my mind, that knows they need the help. And that's different.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I think that, maybe, this outsourced sales idea is example is maybe an outlier, or it's a specific medium that presents its own problems, right? If I was, and for the last 20 years of my business, all my new business generation has been done in person. It's all been networking. This is the first time in my entire career that we've tried to outsource this. And so far it's proven to be very challenging, right? And I know other people with bigger agencies who have said, we've never had a sales team that worked. And I suspect that what I'm discovering is part of the problem, right? I mean, you basically, need to have human conversations with people to understand what the problem is so that you can then diagnose. And I've heard a lot of people equate it to the doctor's office, right? You go to the doctor because, oh, my big toe is swollen. Well, why is your big toe swollen? Oh, maybe you have gout. Maybe you've broken a joint, maybe, whatever. But I'm relying on the doctor's expertise to explain to me what's wrong, rather than me going to the doctor and saying, oh, well, I've got gout, let's fix it. Or whatever it is. And so I think that, just shifting your mindset into this idea of diagnosing versus, trying to, I guess, react to a symptom, I think is really important.
So I had to go in and talk to my insurance agent yesterday, and
this is already starting off bad.
Oh, it's horrible.
I know, I can feel it.
Anytime with an insurance agent.
So, I use one insurance company for my car policy. I use another insurance company for my business policy, and our business has changed over the last few months. So I wanted to go and make sure that, everything was kind of kosher with the changes. And I went in, I started talking to him, and instantly he's trying to sell me on car insurance and switching over from this company to him. And that's not why I'm there. I'm there to get coverage for what I need, not for additional add-ons and stuff like this. And the conversation, by the end of it, like he mentioned 2 or 3 times, just almost derogatory, like I'm an idiot. Like, do you know what car insurance is? Do you know what kind of coverages you have and why it's not good? And I'm like, man, I almost, if it wasn't so much work, I'd cancel my policy altogether with you and go to another company. But we've done, like, it's almost more work than worth. I'm just going to let you degrade me here for a few more times, and I'm going to leave, and then I'll probably call and cancel my policy online. Because it's like, just his approach, the way he kind of like I do you know what car insurance is? It's like, come on, bro. Like, I'm not an idiot. I'm like, I've had car insurance for 20 years. Yeah, my coverage might be a little light for you, but it works for me and what I do. So like, I hate salespeople so
Well,
much.
and I guess back to Shawna's point, right? That's kind of the thing. I mean, clearly this guy is not a leader; he's a worker bee, right? He's further down the pole because he doesn't know how to listen and he doesn't know how to, interact with people. And obviously, he probably would do a little better on the sales if he was doing a little more listening, and waiting for you to uncover your problem
and asking.
That he could then.
That's the big thing, is asking. He didn't ask; he told.
Yeah.
See, we go into this telling and selling. He was telling you what you needed. He was selling you on what he thought you needed instead of asking you what you needed.
Yeah.
And if he had asked you and you'd said, well, this is really where I want to go, and you went, I can help you. Let me get that for you. Also, are you happy with your automobile? Yeah, I'm happy right now. Oh, good. Let me just ask one more question. Does it do this for you? You would have been led right through whatever he wanted you to, but instead he told and sold.
Yeah.
Think about what we do.
And I mean, like, I came in for reason A for this, and then he was focusing so intently on reason B that he never actually addressed reason A. And if he would have taken care of reason A first and then said, hey, for a little bit more, we can get your cars on the same policy and you won't have two bills. Do you want to look into that? Address the main issue first and then come at me with your sales stuff. And, if it's $5-10 more a month for auto insurance through you, it might be worth the hassle for me to have it under one policy instead of having two, and another, same situation, same person. I'll get back with you tomorrow. It's been 3 days. I haven't heard from him.
Right.
So that right there is telling me, okay, I need to go and look somewhere else. I don't need this person anymore. So,
what you're teaching me by this story is that your time is more important than the money.
Yeah, 100%.
But he doesn't understand that. And so as he puts you backward on time, 3 days, too long. Now it's going to be worth the hassle to you. But if somebody was listening to you and said, wow, this is a guy that is willing to pay so that he doesn't have a hassle and he doesn't have to worry about the time. You'd have somebody selling you a lot of stuff by asking good questions.
I imagine you could probably expect some calls after the show, Mike. I imagine.
Maybe so.
I'm going to tag him in the post.
So, Shawna, one of the things that I found in doing research for you that I wanted to spend a little bit of time on, just because I've heard it come up with other leaders and this being a sort of, continual problem for leaders, is bridging sort of the generational divide. So, and, while we're on the theme of communication here, so much of working with people of multiple generations, and even if you go even further, multiple ethnicities or geographies, now in sort of a remote work world, trying to communicate with all these people is very challenging. And I wonder if you could share any tips or even maybe just sort of share where people drop the ball on this so that maybe folks could be a little bit introspective and say, okay, I could improve.
Wonderful. And what a good question. I think we do that. And I believe it's the leader's bias. It's our human bias that if this person's at this age, they must not be good at technology. Or if they're at this age, they must be very good at technology. Or this, and I think that once, like in the animal world, experience matters, but more importantly, roles are more powerful than experience. Like that's why if somebody's a natural leader, they will take a leadership role inside a herd or inside a pack, even if they are not the oldest, even if they're not the youngest. So it has to do with the roles that people are naturally moved into. So if you can stop your bias and look at human beings as individuals, like who cares how old they are or what color they are or anything? Animals do not care. And so if humans don't care, we will ask, and here we go back to my theme really here, we'll ask a question, well, who is the best at this? Who's the best at this? And then help me understand why you are. Versus assigning people based on your biases. This morning, there was a woman in the barn. I have a horse boarding facility, and I go down and I clean my own stall and hang out with my handsome steed each morning. But I lease the barn to a horse riding school. And it's a brilliant model for them because they have different people come and they do work shares. And so people come and clean stalls, or they come and feed the horses. There's about 25 horses down there to earn lessons. And this morning there was a grandma and her daughter, and they're earning lessons for the daughter to take, classes. So it's really adorable. That's absolutely adorable. And the grandma wanted to find out about the pup. And so she said, oh, my phone, I'm not very good at this. And I said, here, let me teach you. Now there's the difference, okay? She's putting her own self down. But if we can say that there isn't anybody at any age in any look at this thing and say that my belief is that you have value. My belief is that you can learn something. My belief is that you could figure this out. And if you start treating people with that belief, everything starts to fall away. Did that help?
Yeah, I think that's true. And, it's funny because as you're talking about just sort of the biases of leaders, I know that I've recognized in myself that I've recently become more of that, like, get off my yard kind of guy. And so I'm seeing this with the younger kids, and maybe it's just because I spend so much time with my teenage son. But I'm just, I notice, oh, it's that loud music and, get off my lawn and, all this stuff. And it's like I'm falling right into those stereotypes, But it is interesting, what you said, especially, and I think maybe we're starting to move past it. But I mean, there was a period of time where if you were 26 years old, everyone assumed you could be a social media manager. It didn't matter. You just knew how to run Twitter. So therefore you could do the job by virtue of being 26. But, I think, those barriers are starting to break down a little bit as older people are being forced to learn technology, and the people who are totally technology averse, or maybe of a generation where they didn't need it at work, are starting to age out of the market. And so you're seeing, basically, it seems to me anyway, that the field is becoming more level. But I think what's so important, and I think it's kind of what you're alluding to, is as a person on the team, for example, being willing to learn, or being, open to the new opportunities or open to new ideas is so much of the battle. And when hiring, maybe it's not about hiring that person for that specific role, but rather it's finding somebody who's willing to learn. And then as a leader, you can coach them through that process.
Or you can help them coach themselves, or say, what resources do you want to move forward? My job as a leader, in my mind, is never to give them what they need. It's to ask them what they're going to do about where they're at. So think about this. So a lot of times a leader will go, what resources can I provide for you? I'm not your mother. I'm hiring you because you have skills and you have a brain. Now I'm going to ask you, what do you have to do to get expert, or what do you have to do to get yourself into a position that's going to get you where you want performance-wise? There's a big difference right there. And I work with a lot of leaders that are always like, well, I told them, I said, have you checked into this? Did you check the mentor program? And the reason you're doing that is why. Instead, stop right there and say, what have you done to learn the skills you need for this position?
Well,
What?
I think in some part too, that goes back to our conversation earlier, right? About, being able to ask these people, because it would be way presumptuous of us to try and expect that we know, right? I mean, if we've hired a person to be a front-end web developer, for example, and we've never built a website in our life, we just manage a team, it would be mighty presumptuous of me to say, oh, okay, well, here's the equipment you need, right? Rather, it would be better to ask, hey, what kind of tools do you need to be able to excel in your position?
Yeah.
And can you do it? Can you, let's be really clear. And one of the things that I think a lot of leaders aren't is clear. It's vision-based or broad-based. So let's get really clear what the end result is. What is the goal of this meeting, this conversation? What is the goal of the project? What does that look like for both of us? Now, can you do it? That's a good question. We're going to discover whether you can as we go. I'm not paying for that. Right?
Yeah. No,
this is the end goal, is that you're going to be as a leadership coach. The end goal is that you will actually be a better communicator. You will think differently. You will get more out of your team. They will stay and be more loyal. There will be less turnover, and you're going to be happier because you're not doing it all. Oh, really? Yeah. Let's get that end result.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I mean, and you've heard it before, right? I mean, a lot of the pundits out there are saying things like, start with the end in mind and things like that, right? So, I mean, if we have a common objective and we're all working towards the same objective, I suppose it's easier to work as a leader in an environment if you know that the objective is to achieve X versus, well, we're not really sure.
Well, I think that that's true and also end in mind. But let's break it down to a micro level where the end result is for us to make a profit or the end result is for us to serve clients. Those are generalisms versus we're having a sales meeting every Monday. What is the goal of the sales meeting? I'm finding more and more they don't actually have a goal for that particular meeting. Is it effective? And all these Zoom meetings. So then you go in to say, how are you? What's your goal for this person? And when you make it situational, you become so much more powerful and you ask completely different questions. And then if our goal for the meeting is this, is it informational? Well, the goal of the sales meeting is to inform. Was a meeting the best way to inform? Look at all these questions. Well, no, it's to share best practices. Is this the best way to share best practices? Okay, well, the goal of the meeting is accountability. What does that look like? What's the scorecard you're using? Now I get, and it's not going to waste my time or your time. The goal of the meeting is to add value. Wow, what value are you adding? Suddenly everything shifts. That makes sense?
Yeah. Well, and I think especially like during COVID, for example, when everybody got real hot and heavy on the Zoom fatigue and, we were calling meetings for everything, it became especially apparent that we don't need a meeting for everything. And I think as people got worn out and tired, we realized all those meetings that we were formerly having in person, were maybe not as important as we thought they were. And back to Mike's point earlier about his experience with the insurance agent, people, their time is important, right? I mean, if I have an 8-hour day at work and I need to maximize my 8 hours to get the most output out, stopping and having a meeting so that we can talk about, last week's sales, if it doesn't have an objective, is just a waste of my time and your time and everybody's time. And now I'm going to feel more pressure during the day to perform. I'm going to have less time. I'm going to have to skip lunch. I'm going to have to work late, and so you're doing all these things and you're creating all these negatives, and it's sort of by accident.
Well, I want to give a nugget based on what you just said, because that's what you were talking about, making sure that the listeners got some good takeaways. And I think leaders, especially during the pandemic and when we have a lot of people working from home, I'm hearing leaders constantly saying, I do check-ins. Oh yeah, I check in with my team every week. And I'm like, I don't understand the reason for a check-in. Really and truly, you're checking up on them. Are you doing your job? Yeah. And really what you're doing is interrupting them. So is that really what you want to do, is a check-in? I mean, think about you as a leader. If you're like, well, I'm just checking in because I have nothing better to do than to find out if you're working.
So I had a class I was taking online, and we'd have group projects that we're doing. And I had one instructor in particularly who he would always check in, try and see how we're doing, but never address or help. Hey, how you doing? Good. Great. We're doing good. We're having a little problems with this. And then he'd be like, great, keep working at it and move on. I'm like, wait a second. That's not quite exactly what I would need out of you as an instructor. Is it someone is like, maybe kind of point us in the right direction, maybe kind of tell us, you're close, try this, do that, just give some sort of feedback, just so that, like, instead of just, all right, you're working. All right, well, move on to the next group. And then, it's like that your check-in just wasted 10 minutes of my time and didn't help anything. And now we're back to regrouping on the problem we had when you first interrupted. So it's like, I wish more, I'm sure this happens all the time with, in the workplace, sales place, whatever field you're in, someone's just there to make sure you're working, not essentially to make sure you're working on the right thing or addressing the right issue. They just want you working, be a busy bee and do stuff. Whereas if they come in, give a little coaching, teach a little bit of this, do a little bit of that, if you did this instead of that, it would work better. Any type of feedback that they can give instead of just checking in and make sure you're digging the hole in the right spot. Then, it's like just little things makes a big difference.
Yeah. And that seems like one of the things or one of the challenges that comes up when people are paid by the hour, right? Because now it's your boss's job to make sure that you're in your chair. It's, making sure you're not spending too much time at lunch, all that kind of stuff. It seems like, a project based or a salary or something like that, can take the pressure off on that end.
It can. Just question whether or not check-ins are valuable. And I think you as a leader or anybody listening to this has to ask themselves, what's the point I'm doing here? What is the point of the check-in? If you were to say that I'm going to do a results report, what? I mean, just change it. It's a results report. I want to know what went really well and what results have you achieved since the last time we talked. Well, now I know exactly what you're expecting and I'll have it ready for you. Now that is the one change of language. And also it's the intent. I intend to just check in because it makes me feel better. I checked in and I did to Mike, checking in, you're doing good. And I wasted everybody's time and I interrupted. Instead of on Thursday at 2, we're going to do a results report. And at that time, I want to know what's going right and have you done in your performance.
So
bang, bang.
I just finished a coding boot camp, which is 12 weeks of intense learning. And they would do a thing during project week when you're working on something like you have a full week to build this app, do everything. Most of the students that are in the program have a goal to learn and to progress and achieve and move forward. But they would do every day, they would do this thing called a stand-up. And then we would have a check-in at the end of the day. So the very first thing we would do is we would address what blockers we're having, what problems we're having, what are we doing to fix it? How are we going to resolve this? What are we going to move forward with? That was our morning check-in. Then we would check in at the end of the day and go over, how did you address this? What forward progress did you make? How did you move?
What were your results?
What were your results? Instead of the random, like jump in and annoy me for 20 minutes and just have a conversation, they give you 2 points in the day of saying, this is what I'm doing. This is how I'm doing it. This is what I'm going to do. And if I need help, address it then. And then at the end of the day, we feedback, we have the follow up and we check in. And right. Then I really like that approach as far as like, they trust, obviously as a student, I'm going to get what I need out of it, regardless, whether I, don't want to learn anything and I'm just there to appease my parents. Sure. Because we definitely had some students like that. But the majority of the people that are going to this program, they want to learn, they want to move forward and progress in life. So they're motivated to work on their own. You don't need someone hovering over your shoulder, making sure that you're doing what you're supposed to do. That morning check-in and that other thing is going to tell it all. You can just look at the progress and determine if anything got done. So I think the self-motivating factor there is important. And you mentioned something earlier about your the grandma that was bringing her granddaughter in to do the horse riding and lessons and stuff like that. Just to have the motivation to get up and come clean up stables and take care of horses to earn time to be able to have the lessons. That says it all right there. It's the drive and the motivating factor for them to get up and actually do that, just to be able to have that lesson in the first place. So, rant over. Sorry.
No, it's fine. One of the things I did a long time ago that you might be interested in as far as that check-in, I was doing a program for a group of people down in California. I would fly down. It was called Create Your Ultimate Year. And we would do a monthly and we would work on all these different things so that it was a well-rounded, and we were having a lot of success, but I realized that between the 1 month and another month, people would fall away. You're all fired up and what have you, but then we would fire. So I decided I was doing a lot of research on how it worked and consistency. So I decided to do something called an accountability call. And it's evolved, but I've been doing it over 15 years. And basically it's 5 days a week at 5:15 a.m. Pacific time.
Oh, you're brutal. That's horrible.
Yeah. And by the way, Brian, it was so funny because after I put it all together, after research and all this stuff, you'd call in at 5:15. So the goal would get up at 5, brush your teeth, get dressed, be on the call at 5:15.
Go to bed. Get up at 8.
You're off by 5:30. It's a 15-minute call. It's quick. And on Mondays, you would quickly say no more than 3 things you'd be accountable for. Tuesdays was a quick check-in. Wednesdays, we do a win. Thursdays, we do a check-in. And Friday, I read what you said you would do. And you don't get to do a story. You say yes, no, or percentage. Did you make 10 sales calls? That's a yes or no, right? Anyway, what I didn't realize, it's 5 days a week. I didn't realize that at the time I needed to get up at 4:30 to run this darn thing. I had a quote. I'm like, oh my God, what was I thinking? But what was so intriguing to me is after I had done 21 days, I'd asked everybody to do, everybody was like getting these gigantic results. I was ready to stop it. I'm like, I don't know what I was thinking. And now I've been doing it for over 15 years and I have one woman on it since it began.
Oh, wow.
And it has been highly successful. It's my coaching clients. But Ryan, to speak to your piece, because we have these really brainy people that all are really committed. Like Mike, you were saying, they get up in the morning. You know, these are people who want to be successful. And so they rub on each other. And if you say on Monday you're going to get something done, and I read it off on Friday, you get it done. It's been really a powerful way to watch it, and just how intense and wonderful it has been to lead this thing.
Yeah. So do you think, I mean, maybe you can say, just from having, this experience, I mean, is the secret to success then accountability? Like, I mean, is that really what it's all about? Because like, I'm just thinking about the things that I need to do each day. I've always joked that I'm ridiculously bad at keeping a to-do list, right? So as a result, I meander a little bit, right? And I get a lot done, but I mean, I could probably get more done, or I could be, more purposeful about the things I got done in any given day. I mean, so do you think, but the one thing that's lacking for me, because I largely work for myself outside of, people I hire on for different projects and things, the accountability is something I lack, right? I don't have a partner. I don't have somebody yelling at me, none of that stuff. So I miss out on that accountability chunk. And so, I mean, in your experience, would you say that as a motivator is maybe sort of the key?
Well, I would say that you've answered your own question if you're in business, because you do have accountability for everyone you've promised something to. So I may not be very good at keeping true to what I say I will do for myself, but if I tell a client I will get it, I'm pretty certain, right, you get it to them.
Yeah.
This is why we're in business, because we have been very accountable to the people that we promise. So my clients, the people on my 5:15, I'm there every morning because I promised. So yes, I believe that it works in almost anything, because if you're, well, and look at what Mike, this guy said he would match him and did a day, and he didn't for 3 days. You're not going to do business with him because he is not accountable. So I believe accountability is absolutely what works. But sometimes it happens to us. We're accountable to somebody that we've actually agreed to work with. And then other things like this 5:15 or whatever you might do, you put in place for yourself. As we all know that we've joined gyms or we've bought programs that we never used. Mm-hmm. The money didn't matter to us.
Yeah. Well,
I got books in my library that I've never read. I paid for them.
Well, and I think that, at least in my mentality, the whole reason for these courses is that you're looking for a shortcut or something. And it's funny because almost every time I reveal the same things, and it's actually the same things we're talking about today, right? It's communication, it's accountability. It's, I mean, like, life isn't so complex, really. It's really just kind of these handful of things.
Well, Ryan, I think that, I don't know if it's just the way you phrased the question initially, but for me, like, if I'm working on a project that's really taxing and it's hard for my brain to process, sometimes you need to take a withdraw and work on something else just for your brain to kind of like subliminally kind of figure it out. And then when you come back and go back to it, all of a sudden it works. All of a sudden you've made headway. All of a sudden it just, everything clicks. And I think the way that you kind of phrased your question is like, oh, no one's holding me accountable, so I jump around. But sometimes I think that jumping around is part of the process. You almost have to do that. Work on something else for a little bit. Maybe it's the same project, different section of the website. Maybe it's the a different client altogether, maybe whatever, as long as your deadline is due, you're making forward progress on it. If you jump and move to another client for a second, it's not going to like derail the train. It actually is probably going to help you a little bit so that you can, the back end process of your brain can actually get done. And then when you come back refreshed, you can make more headway instead of just banging your head against the table, wondering why it's not working.
Another great reason to have a dog.
Exactly. You make you get up and go do stuff.
Well, it's funny. Like, I think it was 2 weeks ago, we had a woman on the show named Julia Gifford, and she was talking about a study that they did. It's sort of in line with like the Pomodoro method of time management, if you've ever heard of that. But basically, through their research, they determined about 52 minutes is all that people have time for, or like have attention for. Yeah. So if you spend 52 minutes and then take 17 minutes off, that's sort of, based on their research, the prime balance, right? So to Mike's point, the idea isn't to be able to hammer out, 6 hours of steady work on one item. Rather, I should probably do 52 minutes and then get up and take the dog out, or, shake a bowl in front of it to make it do something. And then, and then call it then I can go back to work sort of refreshed. I think a lot of people think of breaks as, leaving and going and having coffee and then coming back, and they just go, I can't take half an hour out of the middle of my day. I'm not going to be able to do that. And so instead, it doesn't have to be so much.
The logger story, right? You're familiar with a logger story?
He cut a tree down.
I know the one about a bear crapping in the woods, but that's the only one.
No, it's an old story, and I'll paraphrase it quickly. But there's a new logger, let's talk about more technology driven, more this, and there's a more experienced logger, and of course the new one wants to go into competition, and so they said, let's do this. Let's figure out how many logs we can cut in a tree. I'm more savvy than you. I'm younger than you. I've got all this, vivaciousness. Let's do this. And the experienced logger says, okay, sure. So they all go at it. They both go at it. And about mid-morning, this experienced logger goes and takes a break. And the new logger is like, yeah, I got him. And he works right through. And then lunchtime, the experienced logger goes and takes a full lunch. And the new logger is just really arrogant. I'm going to just kick this down. Then in the afternoon, right when it's really important, the experienced logger, at the end of the day, who cut more logs?
Well, I'm going to guess the experienced logger, or this is an awkward story.
Because every time he took a break, he sharpened his saw.
Yeah.
All right.
As someone who's cut a lot of firewood in my day, I cut a lot of firewood. The sharp blade makes a big difference.
Huge.
You're sitting here working, but you're not making any forward progress because your blade's dull. So yeah.
And so that's the break that you could take that just lets your brain have a break. But also why people don't invest in coaching or they read a book. Take away from your project and go study something else. Invest in something, and then suddenly bing, 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 bing. It's like listening to a podcast right now. Somebody's going to get a little nugget like what you guys were talking about, and they're going to go, this is going to improve my business. And we're right now helping people sharpen their saws.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think, before my blade gets any duller, we'll wrap this thing up. So here in the last couple of minutes, Shawna, do you want to just sort of give people the download on where they can track you down if they'd like to work with you, or if they'd like to learn more about what you do or find more about your content?
Yes, please. Thank you. My name is Shawna Schuh, and it's spelled Shawna. And the last name, even though it sounds like the one on your foot, is spelled Schuh. And everything I do is on my website. I'm on LinkedIn, of course, but I have free resources and lots of articles, and I have a quiz and an ebook, all kinds of things. But if you like my energy, I do a 30-minute courtesy coaching call. And I do it for two reasons. Number one, my goal is to give to the world. And number two, it just gives me an indication of what's going on in almost any industry. And so I really like to give away my time, just in 30-minute increments. So they can get that by signing up for a clarifying call on my website.
Great.
Nice.
Yeah, and we'll be sure to share all that stuff in the comments below.
Good.
So I guess then with that, thanks so much, Shawna. I really appreciate your time.
You both were great. Thank you. I had fun.
Good.
Awesome. And thanks so much to everybody who tunes into the show this week and every week. And we'll see you guys next time.